Well, I agree. I mean, the only way you're going to change the system is change the people that are in the system. And for us, we have to change the way earmarks are administered and the way that they're legislated. Dan mentioned that we have a balanced budget amendment here in Indiana. And you know what? We do, but the leadership in Indiana, especially the Speaker of the House, Pat Bauer, will spend more money than what we take in. I mean, growing up on a farm and riding on a combine with my dad and my granddad, they taught me some very valuable lessons. And one was just pretty simple. You don't spend more money than what you take in. You don't spend money that you don't have. And that's what's wrong with Washington, is that they're spending money that they don't have. I believe we do need to eliminate earmarks because we can't afford it. And what happens is we have congressmen and senators say, you know what, I'll vote for your pet project if you vote for my pet project, and then they go to their buddy and they go to their buddy. Well, pretty soon you have a Christmas tree full of ornaments for all of these different congressmen and senators all around the country with their little pet project. And you know, a little million here and a little million there, and all of a sudden we've got a major problem. Let me just give you an example, or just an idea of the difference between a million and a trillion. And we have over almost $14 trillion worth of debt in this country, with other liabilities that extend way beyond that. But you know, a million is 12 days worth of seconds. A trillion, which is what the stimulus package cost, is 30,000 years worth of seconds. So these congressmen and senators need to put a face on this money and understand that small business people, people out here that balance their checkbooks, need to have the same checks on them in Washington, rather than them just spending money because their buddy wants a project and I want a project. We can't afford it. I've heard this time and time again as we've traveled and talked to people saying, you know what, times are tough. But all I need right now is just government to back off. I can fix it myself. But I don't need government to come in and try to fix the problem. So I believe we need to reform the whole system. I don't believe we need earmarks. We can't afford to pay more money in taxes and borrow more money and cripple our nation's economy because of the rapid and the overspending in Washington, D.C.
Richard. You know, as a Tea Party leader, and spoken with literally thousands of folks across our state, there's a common denominator of being tired of politicians and politics as usual. You know, John just did a very good job of defining what a politician and politics as usual looks like. It's that same conversation of, well, this is how this is with A equals B equals C and 2 plus whatever, you know. We have a problem with that in government right now. That's what's going on up there in D.C. You know, look, we have a greater problem, and it's a philosophical problem, that we have an entitlement mentality, both within our government and both as a society. Our government feels entitled to spend our money. The federal government was never meant to spend our money. Also, as a people, we look for our piece of entitlement pie. For every time we stub our toe or get a runny nose, we look to the federal government. How are they going to solve our problems? We must change that mindset, or we will never, ever stop this out-of-control spending. I've been across our state, and I've told Hoosiers, I've looked them right in the eye and said, I'm not bringing $1 home. I'm not bringing $1 home. If you want your piece of entitlement pie, you got 4 other guys you can vote for. I'm not bringing $1 home. Also with that, I'm not going to allow any other state to have their grubby little hands in our pockets and take our dollars to their states. I will fight that fight. We must rid this entitlement mentality. I've made one promise on the stump. Politicians make promise. I made one promise, and I expect you to hold me to this. I will not write, support, or vote in the affirmative for any legislation that does not reduce the size, scope, and budget of the federal government, period. That is what I will fight for.
Well, my mom and dad raised me to tell the truth. And after 12 years in Washington, D.C., that's all I know to do still, is just to tell you the truth. What nobody said up here is that they'll vote to, well, Richard basically said it, but none of them said that they would vote to cut spending. They said they'd vote to cut earmarks, but they're talking about earmarks. And I'm just telling you the way the budget process works. That's the way it works now. And we can change the budget process, and maybe one of 100 senators will be able to convince 50 of his colleagues to do something that nobody else has done. And I hope that happens. I hope that happens. But until that time, there's got to be a voice in Washington, D.C. That is willing to stand alone if necessary. I don't see that standing alone, quite honestly, in the record of either of my two colleagues that have been up here previously. And so there's a lot of good rhetoric that you can do that. In fact, Senator Coates suggested on the tax bill, which was a brave vote. It wasn't a lone vote. There were a lot of Republicans in the Senate that voted against that tax. Got a lot of Republicans in the House that voted against that tax increase of George H.W. Bush. But when it came time to vote against a candidate, a nominee to the United States Supreme Court that was going to replace a pro-life voice on the Supreme Court, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who is considered an extreme supporter of abortion, Senator Coates was not willing to be that lone voice. He was not willing to be the fourth to say no to an extreme supporter of abortion when there were only three. And once again, when Senator Stutzman had an opportunity to vote against a tax increase and be one of three that would ultimately vote against that tax increase, he voted yes for the tax increase. And it was a tax increase. And if it wasn't a tax increase, why would he then vote earlier this year, to delay the implementation of that tax increase? If it was good public policy, why would you change your vote on that good public policy? And so the question is here today before us: who will have the consistent, conservative voting record that they can come back to you and say, this is why I voted the way I voted, and this is why I will not vote to change my position on that very same issue? That is what we need in Washington, D.C., I believe. A consistent, reliable, conservative voting record. And I look for your support and your examination of that record. Thank you.
Yeah, let him get up there and defend himself, and he lobs some more balls over there.